everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, welcome back.
This time we're going to be taking a look at the TSCO 2024 annual report.
That's right.
Now we know this is a lot of information packed into this report, hundreds of pages. We've got operational highlights, we've got financial figures, we've got their strategic initiatives. It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
But that's why you've got us.
Here to help.
We are going to pull out what matters, give you those key insights into Tesco's business, how they're performing, what strategies they're focused on, and try to give you a glimpse into where this company's headed.
Exactly. That's our mission today.
So we're going to be focusing on Tesco's different business segments and how they've been performing, some key financial highlights that jump out from their reports. We'll touch on their plans for creating shareholder value, which is always important to investors.
Of course.
And then we'll try to wrap it all up with an assessment of where we think, or where the report indicates, Tesco is headed in this ever-changing retail landscape.
Sounds good.
So let's jump right in. Tesco's obviously a huge company, lots of different moving parts, but we're going to start where they make most of their money, and that's the UK and Republic of Ireland segment, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The UK and ROI. And what really jumps out to me, just scanning through this report, is this real focus on value.
Right.
Right. We see mentions of club card prices, the Aldi price match, low everyday prices. It's all over this report.
Absolutely. It feels like value has become absolutely core to their identity, almost like a mantra for them this year. They're very clearly trying to position themselves as the go-to destination for shoppers who are feeling the pinch, with the cost of living crisis and everything.
Yeah, they're not just saying they're competitive on price. They're saying straight up, they're claiming to be the cheapest full-line grocer.
For over a year now, yeah.
For over a year. That's a bold statement.
It is a bold statement, and it'll be interesting to see how their competitors respond to that,
Yeah, but it looks like it's working. I mean, they're reporting increased customer recommendation scores.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. And more importantly, they've actually grown their market share.
Yeah.
Both in terms of volume and value.
Exactly.
So people are buying more items and they're spending more money at Tesco.
Yeah.
That tells you that this message, this value proposition, is resonating with shoppers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those market share figures are particularly impressive because it means they're not just holding their own. They're actually taking a share away from their rivals in a pretty challenging market.
Right. Now, another interesting point here is that they're not just focused on low prices.
Yeah.
They're also talking about investment in their employees. They've increased UK hourly pay quite significantly to £12.02, which is a 9.1% rise.
Yeah, that's a big jump. And, it kind of makes you wonder if this is partly a response to the tight labor market, making sure they can attract and retain staff in a competitive environment.
That's definitely a factor. And you can see how investing in your employees can tie into this whole value proposition,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. I mean, happier employees generally lead to better customer service.
Right, happier customers.
Exactly. So it's not just about the price on the shelf. It's about the whole shopping experience.
And alongside this focus on their employees, they're also highlighting their community initiatives like the Stronger Starts program.
Oh, yeah, the Stronger Starts program. That's a big one for them.
They're talking about £5.3 million grant scheme,
Wow.
providing 450,000 free kids' meals. So it's not just about offering low prices. They're trying to make a positive impact on the communities they serve.
Absolutely. It's about building that goodwill.
Yeah.
Showing customers that they're more than just a faceless corporation.
Now, let's talk about this magnetic value strategy.
Value, yeah.
Sounds a bit like marketing jargon, but it seems like it's about going beyond just being the cheapest.
Right.
It's about finding that balance between price and quality.
Exactly.
For example, they're talking about the Finest range, which is their premium own bland line. And that's actually seen a 9% volume growth.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is. And their overall quality perception has gone up as well.
Yeah.
So it seems like even in this cost of living crisis, people are still willing to spend a bit more for better quality.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it shows that even when people are watching their budgets, they're not necessarily willing to compromise on everything. There's still that desire for a bit of luxury, a bit of indulgence. And Tesco seems to be recognizing that and catering to it with this magnetic value approach.
Right. So it's not just about being the cheapest. It's about offering a range of products at different price points.
A range of quality, yeah.
But always with that emphasis on value.
Exactly.
Now, another thing that's really noticeable in this report is the role of digital.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
And it's all centered around the club card.
Yes.
They've got millions of app users, hundreds of millions of personalized coupons being issued. They've even quadrupled the number of those connected screens you see in the stores.
Yeah, those screens are popping up everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
It's really interesting to see how they're using technology to personalize the shopping experience.
Right. It's not just about collecting points anymore. It's about using data to tailor offers and recommendations to individual shoppers.
Absolutely. And it seems to be paying off. They're seeing improved returns on those personalized coupons.
Which suggests that people are actually responding to them, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. If you're getting offers that are specifically relevant to you, you're more likely to take advantage of them.
And then you've got the growth of their online sponsored search, which is powered by dunnhumby, their data science arm.
Yeah, dunnhumby, they're the brains behind a lot of this stuff.
So suppliers are actually paying to have their products appear more prominently in Tesco's online searches.
That's right. It's another way for Tesco to generate revenue, and it also gives suppliers a more targeted way to reach potential customers.
Right, so it's a win-win for both of them. Now, alongside this digital push, convenience is another big focus.
Oh, absolutely. In today's world, convenience is king, right?
Yeah, right. Everyone wants things fast and easy. So Tesco's got a very strong online market share. Their Whoosh rapid delivery service now covers something like 66% of the UK.
That's impressive.
They've opened over 100 new stores, and they're even expanding their partnership with independent retailers through Booker.
Yeah, they're really trying to cover all the bases, aren't they? Online, delivery, in-store, local shops. They want to be wherever the customer wants to shop.
Right. They're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to buy from them however they choose to do it.
It's a smart strategy.
Mm-hmm.
In a competitive market, you've got to be flexible and adaptable.
Okay, before we move on from the UK and ROI, let's talk about this Save to Invest initiative that they keep mentioning.
Yes, to invest, yeah.
They're very proud of exceeding £1.2 billion in cumulative savings.
That's a huge number.
It is. So what kinds of savings are we talking about here?
Well, it's a whole range of things, really. They're looking at their supply chain, trying to make it more efficient. They're optimizing energy usage in their stores, which is obviously good for the environment as well. And they're constantly looking for ways to streamline their operations, cut out any unnecessary costs.
Right. So it's about finding those little efficiencies that add up to big savings over time.
Exactly. And those savings can then be reinvested back into the business, to improve the customer experience, enhance their digital offerings, or even just to keep prices low.
Right. It's a virtuous circle. Okay, let's move on now to Tesco's Central Europe segment,
Okay, Central Europe.
which covers the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary.
Right.
And it's a slightly different picture here. They're facing a much more challenging environment, largely due to inflation.
Yeah, inflation has been a real headache for businesses across Europe, but it seems to have hit Central Europe particularly hard.
So how has Tesco responded to that?
Well, similar to the UK, they've really doubled down on value. They've introduced things like a low price guarantee on over 500 of their own brand products,
Mm-hmm.
and they've seen an encouraging response from customers in terms of volume growth.
Right, so people are buying more of their cheaper products.
Exactly. Now, overall like-for-like sales growth was pretty small, only 0.2%.
Right.
But food sales actually grew by 1.1%, and they even saw volume growth in food in the last quarter.
Okay, so some positive signs there. But non-food sales were down.
Yeah, down 4.8%. That's probably not a huge surprise. When people are worried about the cost of food, they tend to cut back on things like clothing and homeware.
Makes sense. And it looks like Tesco is adapting to that by launching a new basics range in those categories.
Yeah, the basics range, it's all about offering those essential items at rock-bottom prices.
And their club card penetration in Central Europe is very high, actually 87%.
Yeah, up 2 percentage points from the previous year.
So it seems like they're really getting traction with that loyalty program.
They are. It's clearly a key part of their strategy in this region as well.
Now, despite those positive signs in terms of sales, the profit figures for Central Europe are quite concerning.
Yeah, they took a big hit. Adjusted operating profit was down 50%.
Ouch. That's a significant drop.
It is, and they're attributing it mainly to external factors, particularly in Hungary.
What kind of external factors?
Well, the report mentions things like increased retail taxes, price caps on certain products, and mandatory promotional activities.
Right, so government intervention.
Exactly. And those interventions have really squeezed their profit margins. So it's a combination of a tough trading environment and these regulatory challenges that have led to that profit decline.
Okay, let's move on now to Tesco Bank.
Okay. Tesco Bank.
which has undergone some significant changes this year. They've sold off their core banking operations.
Yeah, the big news was the sale of their banking operations to Barclays.
So they're no longer offering things like credit cards, loans, and savings accounts.
That's right.
So what's left of Tesco Bank?
Well, they're continuing to operate in a few key areas.
Right.
Insurance,
Mm-hmm.
ATMs, travel money, and gift cards.
Right, so more of a niche offering now.
Exactly.
And the profit from these continuing operations has actually increased quite dramatically, over 200%.
Yeah, that's a big jump. And it suggests that those remaining parts of the business are performing well.
But the sale of the core banking operations has had a significant impact on their financials.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've recorded a substantial loss from that sale, which is being treated as discontinued operations in the report.
Right, so it's a bit of a mixed bag for Tesco Bank. The remaining parts are doing well, but the sale itself has resulted in a one-off loss.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that this is a strategic decision. They're getting out of a business that was becoming increasingly challenging.
Right, and they're getting a significant amount of cash in return.
Yeah. That's the key takeaway here. They're expecting to receive around £600 million when the deal is finalized,
Wow.
and potentially another £100 million down the line.
Okay, so what are they going to do with all that cash?
Well, they've already paid out a special dividend of £250 million from Tesco Bank.
Right,
So that's about £1 billion in total that's been generated from this transaction.
£1 billion.
And the report is very clear that the majority of that cash will be returned to shareholders through incremental share buybacks.
Okay, so investors are going to benefit from this sale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, before we delve into the detailed financials, I'm curious, what does Tesco itself identify as its key strengths?
Good question. They highlight three main areas. Their reach, which is, their vast network of stores, and almost complete online coverage in the UK.
Right, they're everywhere.
They are. Their deep understanding of their customers, which comes from their long history in the retail sector and the wealth of data they gather through the club card.
Right, all that data they're collecting.
Exactly. And finally, their best-in-class supply chain, which allows them to operate efficiently and adapt to changing conditions.
So it's about scale, customer knowledge, and operational efficiency.
Exactly.
And these strengths are what underpin their strategic priority.
There are four key strategic priorities.
Magnetic value for customers. Easily the most convenient. I love my Tesco club card.
Which is a bit cheesy, but,
Yeah, a bit cheesy. And safe to invest.
Yeah, those are the four pillars of their strategy. And it's interesting to see how those strengths they just mentioned really feed into those priorities.
Right, it's all interconnected. Okay, let's dive into some of the key financial highlights now. We'll start with the income statement.
Okay, the income statement.
Group sales are up 7.4% to £61.477 billion.
That's healthy growth.
Group revenue is up 4.4% to £68.187 billion.
So they're clearly growing the top line.
Now, when we look at their adjusted operating profit, the UK and ROI segment stands out, with an increase of 15.7%.
Yeah, their core market is performing very well.
And a margin of 4.2%, which is up 42 basis points.
So not only are they growing their profits, but they're also becoming more profitable.
Right, their margins are improving. But Central Europe, as we discussed, saw a sharp decline in adjusted operating profit, down 50%.
Yeah, that's the big negative in the report.
And a margin of 2%, which is down 208 basis points.
Ouch.
The continuing operations of Tesco Bank, while smaller in overall contribution, show a massive increase in profit, up over 200%.
Yeah, those remaining parts are doing very well.
Now, there's also a figure they mention, adjusted profit before tax from continuing and discontinued operations, which includes net pension finance income or costs, which comes in at £2.337 billion.
Right, that's the figure they use for auditor materiality.
So it's basically saying that any amount less than this is not considered significant enough to warrant the auditor's attention.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to the cash flow statement. Operating cash flow is up to £4.886 billion.
That's a good sign. It means they're generating more cash from their operations.
But retail free cash flow, which is the cash left over after capital investments, is slightly down to £2.063 billion.
Right, so they're investing heavily in the business.
Okay, let's take a quick look at the balance sheet.
Okay, the balance sheet.
Net debt, excluding Tesco Bank, has ticked up slightly to £10.856 billion.
It's probably something to keep an eye on.
But the increase isn't dramatic at this stage.
No, not yet.
Inventory, receivables, and payables are all up slightly.
Yeah, that's likely just reflecting the growth in sales.
Right, so nothing too alarming there. Okay, let's move on to their plans for creating shareholder value.
Okay, shareholder value.
We've already talked about the significant share buybacks that are coming from the Tesco bank sale.
Right, that's going to be a big boost for shareholders.
But they were also buying back shares throughout the year as part of their ongoing program.
Yeah, they canceled 279.4 million shares, which is about 4% of their share capital.
And that cost them £752 million.
So they're returning a significant amount of cash to shareholders through buybacks.
And they also paid out £777 million in dividends during the year.
So it's a combination of dividends and buybacks.
Right, which are the two main ways that companies return value to their shareholders.
Exactly.
Okay, finally, let's look ahead to the future.
The future of Tesco.
What's the outlook?
Well, they acknowledge that the economic environment is still very uncertain.
Right, there's a lot of volatility out there.
There is. But they also note that consumer concern about the cost of living has eased slightly.
Okay, so maybe a glimmer of hope there.
Maybe. But their continued emphasis on value for customers will be crucial in navigating these uncertain times.
Right, they can't afford to become complacent.
Absolutely not.
They're also putting a lot of emphasis on sustainability.
Yes, sustainability is a big theme for them.
They've made good progress in reducing their emissions. They're investing in things like greener refrigeration and delivery vehicles.
They're even developing an internal carbon pricing policy.
Which is a really interesting development. It shows how seriously they're taking this.
Yeah, it's not just lip service.
Yeah.
They're putting their money where their mouth is.
And they've also conducted an assessment of the group's viability, and they've concluded that they're well positioned to handle even challenging scenarios.
Yeah, that's reassuring for investors.
It is. Now, looking at areas for future improvement, they've highlighted the potential for further cost reductions through streamlining operations and using more technology.
Right. That save to invest approach is ongoing.
Exactly. And they're also focusing on their employees with things like pay increases and flexible working policies.
Yeah, they're trying to create a positive work environment and attract and retain talent.
So to wrap it all up, what are the key takeaways from this deep dive into Tesco's 2024 annual report?
Well, I think we've seen a company that's very focused on delivering value to its customers in a challenging environment, particularly in its core UK and ROI market.
Mm-hmm.
And that focus is driving profit growth.
Right. They're doing well in their biggest market.
They are. Their digital strategy, which is anchored by the Club Card, is becoming increasingly powerful.
Yeah, they're really leveraging that data.
They are. The sale of the banking operations is a major strategic move that will provide a significant amount of cash for further share buybacks.
£1 billion.
Exactly. And finally, they're demonstrating a clear and ongoing commitment to sustainability across their operations.
Right. They're taking that very seriously.
And are.
So overall, it seems like Tesco's in a pretty good position despite the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, I think so. They're adapting to a changing retail landscape. They're investing in their future. And they're focused on delivering value to both their customers and their shareholders.
Now, before we go, we want to leave you with a question to think about.
A question for our listeners.
Considering the rapid changes we're seeing in how people shop and the increasing focus on sustainability, what do you think will be the biggest opportunity and the biggest hurdle for Tesco to navigate in the coming years?
Beyond what we've discussed today, it's something to ponder.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts. And if you want to explore Tesco's performance and strategy in even more detail, we highly recommend checking out the full annual report.
It's a fascinating read.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye.